wow, never thought it was going to happen this soon, but very, very grateful.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Behind the bright lights of Nashville and the polished smiles of the Grand Ole Opry, not every friendship was real. One of the most surprising stories whispered through the halls of country music involves Reba McEntire, the woman many fans picture as warm, direct, and always professional. But beneath that public kindness, there were rumors of a secret grudge she held against a fellow singer. It wasn't loud, it wasn't advertised, but people who worked the circuit quietly said the sting lasted a long time. For a lot of fans, that idea was almost impossible to square with the image of a caring superstar. For those who watched the small gestures and read between the lines, it was one of Nashville's bitter little secrets. In the early 1980s, Reba's rise felt like destiny. She stepped onto the Opry stage, sent songs to the radio, and built a string of hits that made her voice one of the most familiar in the country world. Songs like the ones that put her on the map, the sweeping ballads and the clear, strong vocals, came to define a new era. Nashville in those years was crowded and hungry. There were more singers than there were prime radio plays, and artists fought hard to keep their place in line. It was a world where a single hit could change everything, and a single misstep could cost momentum. The competition was real, and behind the scenes, people made alliances and sometimes quietly enemies. Into that charged atmosphere came a duet that would be remembered for its power on record and its odd energy off stage. The song's story was written around two women and a man caught in the middle, a perfect country setup. When Reba recorded the duet in the early 1990s, the song shot into the public's heart. It sounded like a classic country drama brought to life, and listeners loved it. The recording became a huge success, and everyone talked about the chemistry in the studio. But then, as the buzz spread, so did a different kind of talk, softer, meaner, the kind that lives in dressing rooms and hotel lobbies. People started wondering if the tension in the song had anything to do with tension between the singers themselves. One of the names that kept surfacing in those whispers was Linda Davis. Linda had a working relationship with Reba before the duet. She had sung with her in other settings and was known in Nashville as a capable, steady voice. For the public, Linda's role was simple, a duet partner who matched Reba's energy when the track demanded two strong women. For a lot of insiders, though, there was more to the story. They said that the duet was not exactly what Reba had imagined. She had apparently hoped for a different kind of pairing, someone whose star was already bright and who might bring a certain heat to the stage. When the label pushed Linda forward instead, some people read that as a small betrayal, the kind that rankles in a business where choices feel personal. Rumors tightened around the recording like a string around a package. The duet, when released, did what great duets do. It stirred listeners and climbed charts. It felt like a turning point and a glittering moment for both singers. But behind that success, Reba reportedly felt complicated. Some claimed she had wanted a different singer on the track and had been outvoted by executives who believed Linda would fit the role. Others said the choice was practical, a label decision based on schedules or relationships. Whatever the truth, the result left a wound that some said would not heal easily. When success hits, it can hide messy choices. When it lingers, it can make small slights feel enormous. Those who were present at televised award shows remember the way Reba carried herself during live performances with her guests. She was measured, the same artist she always was. But a few observers noticed a stiffness, a distance in her eyes, a small pause that felt like a cold wind. Fans who watched the performance at industry events later wrote about how the chemistry seemed focused on the lyrics and stagecraft, but not on warmth between the two women. It's possible none of that meant anything. Performers often act out stories without letting personal feelings show. But when fans saw polite smiles that didn't reach the eyes, when they watched hands barely brush, they began to wonder if some of the song's heat had been real in more ways than one. After the duet's enormous run through the charts, Linda didn't ascend in the way some expected. That fact fed speculation. In Nashville, whispers often turn into tidy explanations. Maybe Linda's career stalled because she had crossed Reba. Maybe big radio programmers and promoters shy away from those who have angered a superstar. People told the sort of stories that make sense in a town where relationships and favors shape the future. Others pushed back. Lots of artists don't become stars after one hit, and the nature of fame is complicated. Still, the narrative that a quiet feud had real consequences stuck to the story like dew on a spider web. Reba rarely spoke about the matter directly. In interviews, she would sometimes answer questions about partnerships with a few measured words and then move on. She didn't pursue public conflict, and she didn't trash colleagues in the press. When asked about the duet years later, she would stay tight-lipped or say something brief that neither confirmed nor denied the deeper stories. That reticence only added fuel to the gossip fires. Silence in show business can be a strategy, an act of grace, or a shield. For her fans who wanted their star to be kind and open, the short replies were a disappointment. For those who pay attention to how famous people manage their reputation, the silence was an answer in itself. Linda, for her part, spoke more plainly in smaller interviews and private conversations. She admitted that the experience was layered and not as simple as a single memory of joy. There were times she described the collaboration as complicated, which the press then ran with and turned into yet more fodder for those looking for a scandal. She never painted herself as a villain, and she certainly didn't claim to have injured Reba on purpose. In her own telling, the duet was a career highlight and a complex human memory wrapped together. That nuance was lost in the louder versions of the story, where people preferred either a pure fairy tale or a neat villain, rarely both. Nashville insiders have the habit of weighing actions in private. The story grew legs when a few writers recalled backstage behavior that suggested a rift, small gestures, a cool exchange of greetings, an absence of the long embraces that can follow chart success. Those little things mattered more to people who understood how alliances form in country music. An artist who does not forgive publicly can still reshape the backstage world through quieter mechanisms. Choices about tour invitations, dinner conversations, or who gets called for a duet at the last minute. Word spread that after the duet's success, the two women did not share the same networks in the way they had before, and that their professional paths spoke of distance more than affection. The idea of betrayal here has a personal edge. Reba has often spoken in public about trust. In different interviews over the years, she has made it clear that when someone lets her down, it stays with her. For a person who builds a life on trusting collaborators and believing in the honesty of lyrics, that kind of disappointment cuts deep. Add the pressure of being under the spotlight, and small wounds can feel larger, more permanent. People who knew her during that period said she was not one for public drama, but privately, she was not quick to move past being hurt. Whether that translated into a lifetime of resentment is a different question. But for some observers, the memory of the duet incident stayed fixed as the moment a line had been crossed. There were other stories that circled the event. Some claimed Reba wanted a higher-profile star to sing with her, a name who could match her fame and keep the public eye on both singers. That might be a simple fact of marketing, a desire to pair two big names for maximum impact. Others suggested Reba had a history of being protective over her image and choices, making any label interference feel like a personal slight. Record companies are companies first, and they make moves that artists sometimes accept and sometimes resent. When a major artist's instincts collide with a label's strategy, the consequences can be messy. For Reba, the clash may have blurred the boundary between professional disappointment and personal betrayal. Fans are storytellers by nature. They like the clear lines, heroes, villains, heartbreaks, and reconciliations. Over time, the duet became a story that fits neatly into classic country themes. Two women, one man, love and rivalry. The public bought the song's drama, and also fed the backstage drama with their own imagination. People wrote about how Reba's sultry performance seemed to say more than the lyrics, and how Linda's presence created a new narrative. The more the story was told, the more it became part of the lore. The line, "I'll never forgive her," began to float through forums and gossip columns like a tagline, sometimes cited as a direct quote, and sometimes as a shorthand for how unforgiving Nashville could be. But the truth, as it so often is, lives in a gray zone between fact and interpretation. There is a human cost to being locked into a legend. For Linda, having a major song with Reba should have been a ticket to bigger stages and brighter lights. That it did not turn into a career takeover is, in truth, a complicated fact. Careers rise and fall for many reasons: timing, market shifts, personal choices, or simply luck. It would be too neat and too mean to say that one person's displeasure can pull the thread on someone else's entire future. Yet, in an industry where relationships and goodwill matter so much, a superstar's distance can make a difference. Whether that distance was a conscious decision or a natural drift fueled by different priorities is hard to pin down. People are rarely the villains of their own stories. Most are just doing what their situations demand. Music history remembers great songs for what they do to listeners. That duet kept playing on the radio, and people sang along in bars and kitchens and cars. The record's success made it part of Reba's catalog, a shining moment in her long career. But the human story around it, the choice of a duet partner, the quiet tensions, the ways success can sharpen feelings, stuck in minds as an example of how messy fame can be. Fans who loved both singers sighed and moved on. Others kept the notion of the feud alive, telling it again at parties and online message boards. In some ways, the song achieved what great art often does. It reflected truth back to its listeners, but that truth was complicated, spangled with both beauty and pain. Reba's public persona remained strong. She continued to record, to perform, to take on new projects, and to grow her reputation as a formidable artist with a generous public image. Over the years, she showed warmth in interviews and on stage, and many moments of genuine laughter with colleagues lit up press photos and TV clips. Those images make it hard to reconcile the idea of a long simmering grudge. Yet people also know that public warmth does not always mirror private feelings. The small unspoken things, who you call when you need a favor, whose name you suggest at a table, often reveal more than a headline ever will. The legend of the feud hardened in certain circles. People repeated that Reba never worked with Linda again in a major way, though they rarely offered documentation beyond anecdotes and memory. Reconciliation, when it happens, sometimes happens quietly. When it doesn't, the silence becomes a kind of answer. Some insiders say the two simply drifted apart, their careers moving in different directions with little overlap. Others insist there was a deliberate choice, a cooling that suggested more than mere distance. Neither version can be fully verified now because memory softens and people protect their private histories. What remains true is that the duet existed, that it brought power to the airwaves, and that it left behind a human story full of emotion. Reba herself, as she aged in the business, kept referring to trust as something she treasured. She spoke of loyalty and of learning who to let close. Those comments, when set against the duet tale, fed the rumor mill. Whether those private feelings ever hardened into something like a vow of never forgiving is something only she would know. For the rest of the world, the story lives in the space between public record and private truth, in memories, in interviews, and in the way people choose to tell the tale. Fans still talk about it. When old award night footage gets reshared, when someone posts the duet on social media, comments appear. Some people praise the song, others point to the supposed backstage chill, and a few tell the story in the same hushed tone as if they are revealing a secret. The line about never forgiving someone gets repeated, not always as a claim of fact, but as part of a myth that helps explain the messy emotional economy of show business. People like a moral arc. Someone is hurt, someone betrays, someone forgives or refuses to forgive. This song's story fits into that need for narrative. In the end, Reba McEntire remained a legend of country music, a singer whose career spanned decades and whose voice touched countless listeners. The idea that she once felt deeply betrayed, that she might have been unable to forgive, doesn't erase her gifts or the warmth she showed in other moments. It simply reminds people that being a star doesn't make someone immune to ordinary pain. Artists are people first. They feel the same bruises and slights as anyone else, only on a larger stage. And the duet? It stays on, a record of a moment where art and life brushed up against one another. It rings out in bars and homes, and with each listen, new layers of meaning are added by the listener's imagination. If Reba did carry a private hurt for a long time, that hurt is part of her human story now, woven into the tapestry of fame and friendship and music. If she forgave, then perhaps the silence was just that, silence, not spite. The truth is known fully only to the people who lived it. Nashville keeps its legends close and its secrets closer. For some fans, the question that lingers is simple and a little painful. If a star like Reba could be so hurt by one choice, what does that say about the world behind the music? For others, it is a reminder that even the brightest lights throw shadows. The tale of this duet, the success, the whispers, and the possibility of a grudge, continues to fascinate because it shows how human feelings can shape careers and stories in ways that public records never capture. And so the rumor stays alive, told and retold, a great voice, a powerful duet, and a secret that, whether real or partly imagined, adds a sharp edge to the music. If Reba supposedly said she would never forgive, the words became part of country folklore. Whether they were ever spoken aloud or only felt in quiet moments, they remain a haunting note in the long song of Nashville. What other secrets does the city keep? What other stories are folded into the lyrics that the public loves? Those questions stay open, and the duet plays on, letting listeners choose what to hear, the melody, the words, or the silence between them.